Hi, I'm Sean Armstrong. Welcome to Module 3 of this course based on my book, Blood-Stained Banner. In this lesson, we're going to step back from specific countries and look at systems. The title of this module is Why Systems Fail or Flourish, Incentives, Innovation, and the Tragedy of the Commons. This is where we talk about how capitalism and how socialism and communism actually work in practice, not just in slogans, but in the way they treat incentives, ownership, and human nature. Let's start with a simple idea. People respond to incentives. That's not cynical, that's just how humans work. If a system rewards innovation, hard work, and smart risk-taking, you tend to get more of those things. If a system blurs rewards or punishes risk or ignores performance, you tend to get less of those things. So in this module, we'll look at incentives and innovation, the tragedy of the commons and public ownership, the debates around privatization versus equity, and even philanthropy, how wealth created in market systems can fund big public and charitable projects, and what that means. This is the Econ and History chapter of the course. Charts, examples, and simple thought experiments, no PhD required. Let's talk capitalism first. In a capitalist system, people and firms own businesses. They compete with each other. They can make a lot if they succeed, and lose a lot if they fail. That profit and loss feedback is not just about greed, it's an information system. High profits signal, people really want this, do more. Heavy losses signal, people don't want this, do less, fix it or die. That pressure pushes firms to cut waste, improve quality, invent new products, use resources more efficiently. Now look at socialism and communism in their classic central planning form. The state owns or controls the big industries. A central committee sets production targets. Prices are often fixed, not discovered in a market. The problem is information and incentives. Central planners don't feel the pain of a bad decision, the way a private firm does. If they plan poorly, they don't go bankrupt. They just write another plan, or blame a local manager, or hide the failure in statistics. Without competition and profit signals, it's very hard to know what people actually want, what's worth producing, when to change course. That's why we see in so many planned economies shortages of basic goods, surpluses of things no one wants, old technology hanging around long after it should have died. In Blood-Stained Banner, I walk through examples of how central planning looks efficient on paper, but falls apart when it hits real human behavior. Now let's talk about the tragedy of the commons. Imagine a shared pasture that belongs to everyone in a village. Every herder can graze their animal there. No one truly owns it. No one feels fully responsible. What happens over time? Each person thinks, if I add one more cow, I get more benefit. Everyone else shares the cost of the grass, gets worn down. So everyone adds more and more cows. Eventually, the grass is destroyed. The land is degraded. Everyone is worse off. That's the tragedy of the commons. When everyone owns something, often no one really takes care of it. We see versions of this in overfished oceans, polluted rivers, mismanaged public housing, state-run enterprises where the government owns it, but nobody feels true responsibility. This doesn't mean public ownership is always doomed, but it does mean you have to be extremely careful about how you set it up. Responsibility, rules, enforcement, and incentives around shared resources. So what's the answer? Should everything be private? Should everything be public? Is there a middle ground with community or mixed models? In practice, we see all three. 1. Private ownership. Works very well for many goods, cars, clothes, phones, most everyday products. 2. Public ownership or control. Sometimes makes sense for basic rules, courts, national defense, and some infrastructure. 3. Community management can work for local water systems, forecasts, or small-scale commons with strong norms and rules. The point isn't that one model is perfect. The point is that ownership structure changes behavior. If you treat all public resources as automatically virtuous because socialism, you'll ignore the way they can be abused or neglected. If you treat all private ownership as automatically evil, you'll miss cases where it actually protects resources because the owner has skin in the game. This brings us to the privatization versus equity debate. On the pro-privatization side, when someone owns something, they have a direct incentive to maintain it, improve it, and avoid waste. They can't just shrug and say, not my problem. On the equity concern side, if you privatize everything, you risk exclusion. Poor people may be priced out of essentials like water, healthcare, or housing if there's no safety net or regulation. So the real question is not privatization good or bad. The real question is which things are better managed with strong market incentives, and which things need some level of public guarantee so they don't lock people out of basic human needs. In Bloodstained Banner, I use this tension to analyze how different systems handle both efficiency and fairness, and the way socialist and communist experiments have gone wrong by pretending they can fix everything just by declaring it equal. Now let's bring in a slightly uncomfortable topic, philanthropy under capitalism. In market systems, essentially, especially in rich countries, you get people and companies who accumulate very large fortunes. That raises all kinds of debates about inequality and fairness. But it also creates the possibility of large-scale philanthropy, funding universities and hospitals, backing scientific research, paying for vaccines, supporting global charities. So you get a paradox. The same system that can create billionaires can also generate the resources to tackle huge public health and education problems. That doesn't mean we just shrug and say, don't worry, the billionaires will fix it. We still have to ask tough questions. Who sets the agenda? Should private foundations have that much influence? Are we depending on charity to solve problems that governments should handle more fairly? In Chapter 2, I talk about the uneasy mix, market-driven wealth, political debates over inequality, and philanthropy stepping in as both a blessing and a complication. Let's pull this together. In this module, we looked at incentives and innovation under capitalism versus central planning. Talked about the tragedy of the commons and what happens when everyone owns something and no one really feels responsible. Explored public versus private versus community ownership models. Walked through the privatization versus equity debate. Efficiency on one side, access and fairness on the other. And we touched on philanthropy, where market-generated wealth funds large public and charitable projects, but also raises big questions about power and accountability. Here's the line that sums it up. Chapter 2 of Bloodstained Banner dives into efficiency, commons problems, and even philanthropy in much more detail. This module gives you the skeleton. The book adds the muscle and citations. If this video helped you see the patterns, Chapter 2 is where you'll see the arguments, the history, and the references laid out on paper. In the next module, we're going to move from theory into 100 years of experiments and what happened when socialism and communism left the textbook and took over real countries. I'm Sean Armstrong. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Module 4.